Hello, conference delegates. Just like to make a brief announcement. We'll be starting shortly. The session chair is just organizing something that he needs for the next session. So kindly bear with us. We'll be starting soon. Thank you.
I'll stand here. I'm not sure if the other lady can also stand here. There's the three. You ready? Ladies and gentlemen, can we please take our seats? The physical participants, can we just check on the virtual panel members firstly of this session? We have on board Dr. Johnny Strijdom. Johnny, good afternoon. Welcome again to this session. And we have on board also, let's see, Ms. Sara McHattie, if I pronounce your surname correctly, McHattie. Welcome. Can you hear us? Good. And Professor Evance Kalula. Evance, are you with us? Evance?
Yes, I am, Marius. I am. I'm here.
Good.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to delay any further. We hope there won't be any technical hiccup. This is before the closing ceremony, at least this is the final session, which is, well, I would suggest to you the highlight of the conference. And what we have done is to ask a few very, very esteemed colleagues to make up our panel, to be listened to and to be quizzed, interrogated by all of us here and those of us who are virtually present. The purpose of this particular session is to almost ask, like, so where to now? What do we make of everything we have heard, what we have learned, what we have contributed to? How do we take this forward? For us as at SASPEN, our view on this is never to leave the discussions at conference level just there, but to try and bring everything together, chart a way forward. And very often the work done and the presentation made at a conference such as this would then inform further detailed work, research work, country workshops, etc. Right, the session then is entitled Steps to Achieve Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. The Way Forward on Social Protection and Social Services in the SADC Region. Again, Agenda 2063 and 2030 speakers. We could add to that, as you will hear more from Dr. Strijdom, also Social Agenda 2063, which deals with the social dimension of Agenda 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my esteemed pleasure and honor and privilege to introduce to you our four panelists. Let me start off by Professor Evance Kalula. Now, if you were to give me time, I could have entertained you until what time this evening when we start, when we discuss or introduce you to somebody like Professor Evance Kalula, a very special person, a very special committed colleague and expert to the case of social protection as well, amongst so many other things. Well, if I read to you what we have on him, and this is just a little bit of a small snapshot. He's a Zambian.
Please don't, Marius.
Come again?
Please don't. No need to do that, please.
No, Evans, you are now in my hands, so you just please listen to us, please. Thank you. Professor Evance Kalula, Zambian, he is a chairperson of the ILO's Committee on Freedom of Association, a hot seat, but I personally couldn't know of anybody more able to do this. He is, in fact, the first African to serve in this position in the ILO's 100-year history. Well, you have to prepare for many more claps. He is also Emeritus Professor of Law at the University of Cape Town and Honorary Professor at the University of Rwanda. He holds a number of degrees in law, including a PhD. He was educated at the University of Zambia School of Law, where he did an LLB in 1974, King's College London, Balliol College Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, and the University of Warwick School of Law. He's a fellow of the African Academy of Sciences, a member of the Council of the Academy of Science of South Africa, a member of the Zambian Academy of Sciences, and fellow of the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study. He's also a visiting lecturer in law at Mulungushi University, as well as an associate of the Southern African Regional Universities Association. He's a general editor of the Juta African Title Series and sits on various journals, editorial and similar boards internationally. He previously served as chair of the University of Lusaka Council, where he still serves as executive policy advisor, chair of the then South African Employment Conditions Commission, member of the ILO Commission on Inquiry and Freedom of Association in Zimbabwe, member of the Ministerial Advisory Panel of the former South African Department of Economic Development. He's also, importantly, past president of the International Labour Employment Relations Association, ILERA. Now, ladies and gentlemen, be assured this is just a snapshot of what I know of this very impressive man, who, by the way, last week was awarded honorary lifetime membership of ILERA's African and Southern African chapter, LARASA. And the person who then introduced him had to spend about 25 minutes just to provide a very short overview of Professor Evance Kalula, our first panel members. Evance, like all the other panel members, we ask you to speak to what you want to say in about 8 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marius, for that embarrassing word. I can assure you, colleagues and friends, that that is an exaggeration of sorts, in not as distinguished as he makes out to be. But for the same, I would like, I'm privileged to share this platform with particularly John, who, as you hear from him, he has got very few equals in the African continent in terms of this area. My sense of where do we go from here is premised on social justice, and social justice defined, of course, from the world I know best, and that's the world of work. The world of work, in the way it has sought to contribute to social justice, has had a labored kind of a checkered history to this day. The fact that the crisis that we are facing now, COVID and previous crises that the world has faced, not least Africa in particular, we are talking about the increasing inequality, we are talking about poverty, we are talking about the inability of states, countries in SADC and beyond to come to the occasion to tackle this, notwithstanding that in some cases there may be political will. And that political will is not always there. When it is there, the capacity is not always there to implement the agreed on program. In SADC, lest I be accused of being too pessimistic, as Marius's work actually shows across the continent, there are initiatives that I think may not necessarily get us to the world to where it wants to be in 2030 and 2063, but at least is beginning to unfold. And that, as I said at the beginning, is in the field of social justice. Social justice leads defined as part and parcel of human rights, and human rights in across the board, from where you are, whether you are talking of the impact of climate change, as we saw in this conference, where we are, whether we are talking of the provision of social services, which is the core of this conference, is those fields, and the inability of the world to sort of to live what is agreed on. And increasingly, of course, the problem is not only the inability to define and tackle problems as they exist. At times, I think there is a tendency on our part, and that covers all countries, to deny reality. Climate change is one of those, where we sort of repeatedly human endeavors, for various reasons, refuse to accept that climate change is here. And as always, and this is the crux of the matter, as always, when these things happen, the most affected are the most vulnerable in society. And in our case, of course, in terms of social protection, we are talking of inadequate services, basic needs, as it has been defined. So the challenges and how we go forward need to be multifaceted. They need to involve a new political commitment, particularly in terms of the global north, in terms of realizing that the situation that the South, and we are at the heart of the South in Africa, is not really making a failure on the part of where we are. But it is an intertwined kind of fate that the humanity stands to lose together and to overcome together. So going forward will mean that internationally we regroup in terms of the consensus. I'm referring you, colleagues, what happened at the creation of the the International Labour Organization 100 years ago. What happened there is that there was a conflict, a terrible conflict that arose. And at the conclusion of that conflict, the world more or less said they wanted to focus, they wanted to bring about social justice as an assurance of peace. That crisis is no greater than what we are facing now. What we are facing now in terms of COVID, in terms of increased poverty, in terms of increasing inequality is a shame to all of us. And we cannot afford to let territorial, political kind of boundaries stand in the way. So in talking about, going forward, at least in the world of work, which has got implications broadly, because I mean, you look at the livelihoods, in fact, is key to providing basic needs and to providing social protection that we all need. You need to anticipate the fact that the world of work has changed. In Africa, in SADC in particular, we have a situation where mostly, I mean, less than 10% of the working sectors, are in the formal sector. More than 90%. You take sort of the most industrialized country where I'm speaking from, it only has 40% of the formal sector and declining. In some countries, that has been put at 3%, and yet we refuse to recognize that this is the world we live in. There is, I think, almost hallucinating kind of imagination, and not least in the ILO. There's, that this vast informal sector has got to be formalized. You only have to look at the recommendation that says they are going to be looking at formalizing the informal sector. It's not possible, and some will say not desirable, because it begs the issue. And the issue is about providing social protection, basic needs to people to be able to survive, regardless of where they are, regardless of where they live and work. And in fact, to the ILO's credit, they regard the issue of decent work, which is a cornerstone of their policy of social justice, as being applicable wherever work takes place, regardless. How you do that has got to be one of the most kind of important steps tools we need to develop, be able to overcome and cover all areas, all sectors of the economy. There is also the question of education and skills. The ILO sort of has shared recently, for those of you who follow the ILO newsletter, the kind of deficit the world faces in terms of skills. Already, I think a vast majority of our people, when I say our people in Africa, they are not skilled, be able to deal, to engage with the modern economy, the fourth industrial revolution. It's not any better in the global north, except that, of course, with them, in terms of social protection, they do have a better basis on which to survive, but that is not to say they are prepared in terms of the goals the global community has set itself to reach the goals. So the way forward, in summary, and I'm very aware that I'm talking very generally here, deliberately. In summary, what we need to do is not for lack of issues, it's not for lack of our knowing what needs to be done. We need to get serious about developing the kind of multilateral political will to reach out, create the kind of institutions, the kind of policies, the kind of capacity to implement these policies that is going to advance the goals that have been set out for 2030 and 2063. In the world of work, as I keep saying, it's about having to live with a crisis that is COVID now, with no end in sight, but not accepting that that is going to define our fate going forward. That we have to live with it. We've got to balance. In the balance, I mean, there's a lot of talk now. Those in Namibia and South Africa who know the contestation between those who supposedly want to keep the economies open, and there's everything to be said for that, and the needs of people in terms of public health, in terms of jobs, in terms of basic needs accommodation. And these are the issues. So political will, capacity development, multilateral consensus, and sort of tending to basic needs. The ILO has said, and with good reason, that no country is too poor to provide basic needs for their people. It doesn't matter. What happens? Lack of political will, lack of capacity, ability to face up to the challenges that that we should be facing up. So, in summary, that's what I would want to share with you. I would be glad to canvass this in questions or discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evans. What I should also have told you is that Evans is also a board member of the Board of Trustees of SASPEN. And then it's also my privilege to introduce to you a member of the advisory panel of SASPEN, Dr. Johan Strijdom, who is currently in Addis Ababa, assisting the African Union Commission. Now, also for Johnny, I would need actually a few hours to take you through who this very impressive man and his equally impressive work, who he is and what his work is all about. He's a Namibian who retired after 11 years as head of the Division of Social Welfare at the African Union Commission. Before that, he also had an illustrious career. He started off, I believe, in academia, or he was also at some stage with the UNAM. In event, the head of division of social welfare, vulnerable groups and drug control in the Department of Social Affairs, as it was then known, of the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa. This is where I came to know him. Since his retirement, he has been recalled to the AUC for consultation on drug control, on social policy, on family policy, the informal economy, among others. Let me hasten to add that he has also been and is being consulted by other organizations, has done, excellent work also for the for UNICEF, amongst others. Maybe let me just first say that this is also involved in as an extraordinary professor in gerontology at the Northwest University in South Africa. Most importantly, so he says, most importantly, he is an experienced small-scale farmer outside Gaborone, Botswana. So you can see how multitask and multi-skilled our panel members are. For the topics rather that we have been discussing the last 2 days, I wonder whether we, unless you know about it, can actually appreciate the work that Dr. Strijdom, or as we know him, Johnny, has been doing over the years. He was involved with the AUC, I believe, at a time when the social policy framework for Africa was adopted and had to be implemented. He was very much involved with a number of very, very important AU documents, instruments, guiding frameworks that have been developed. And those of you who follow what is happening at the African Union Commission, I mean, we have seen protocols on aging, on disability, and in other areas. We have seen major policy documents on a range of issues, you know, just too many to mention in our field. More recently, he was involved, in fact, 3 of us were involved in drafting a social agenda 2063, and also its implementation plan, and a host of other issues. So no wonder that the African Union Commission has called on his expertise again to assist with taking matters forward, and I believe he will talk to some of those matters. Ladies and gentlemen, what a privilege to invite Dr. Strijdom to talk to us, and I believe, Johnny, you have sent through a few PowerPoint notes, am I right? Is this, can I just ask our technical team at the back, is this being uploaded, the PowerPoint? Okay, is there, please beam it up, and Johnny, all over to you, and welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Marius. And thank you so much for FES, who invited me to say a few words here at the end. And I was so privileged to listen to all the fantastic presentations throughout this wonderful session of SASPEN. And I hope to be part of it again next year. You mentioned a few policy instruments, but I must really say it was a team effort. And here at the African Union Commission, people like the director, the commissioner, Dr. Jane-Marie Kongolo, and of course our dear friend, Mr. Lefoko Kesamang, were the ones who really drove the processes afterwards. And we must just give them all the thanks for what they have been doing. So thanks again. Yes, can we go to the next slide, please? Or do, oh, thank you. I'm going to quickly take you through to very exciting opportunities. What happened since the adoption of the Social Agenda 2063, and so that we are all on board. Also, just to flag that the AU has really been working hard and trying to go further than just having a policy instrument adopted. Now, we are busy, when we come back to Agenda 2063, we are now entering the second decade for Agenda 2063, and already the second 10-year implementation plan is being developed. You can imagine there are a number of very important key policy documents considered for the second 10-year implementation plan. Now, regarding social protection, it is a separate and comprehensive social policy pillar provided for in the AU Social Agenda 2063. We say the SA63. It was adopted in February last year, and on the basis of the 9 social policy pillars, we developed an AU comprehensive response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the ministers at the meeting in December this year will have a look at that, and they will consider it also for further implementation. I must also say that World Food Programme was one of the first international organizations right at the beginning who asked for a comprehensive response, and it's wonderful to have a World Food Programme on the panel as well. Now, then we have the Protocol to the Rights of Citizens to Social Protection and Social Security. Again, the chairperson has been very involved there. I mean, him and Dr. Tavengwa Nongo, and we are grateful that it could see the light and that it was adopted last month. And it will now just get the final stamp at the upcoming Executive Council meeting early next year. There's also a tracking questionnaire that was developed for the implementation for Social Agenda 2063, which will also be considered by the ministers, because as you know, when the ministers adopt an instrument, they request for the report on its implementation every 2 years. So then this questionnaire will help member states to also track their progress in that regard. We also have 3 co-creation workshops which will take place before the end of this year on 3 key areas for the Social Agenda 2063, Policy Pillar 182, for instance, on ending child marriage, that is on gender equality. And the second one on care system, this is more for older people, in terms of Social Policy Pillar 3, which is social protection, and then on water and sanitation and hygiene, Social Policy Pillar 4. So we will comb out research agendas to help and facilitate the implementation of Social Agenda 2063 in these areas. But very exciting, dear colleagues, is the new 10-year social and social economy, solidarity economy strategy that is being developed as we speak. We hope that we could flag it, or at least, flag it at the upcoming ministerial meeting. But the idea is that there must be proper consultation and validation over the course of next year, because this is quite a new concept and very important, as you will see for us on the next slide. And we hope that when it is finalized, the key policy instruments for the next decade. Now, if I refer to presentations of speakers, like for instance, Renata of UNDP, where she mentioned that we should combine social assistance with access to basic services, Drs. Dawson and Kabelenga yesterday, alluding to transformative social protection, and that youth want to see themselves working or in education and in jobs and not specifically handouts. Professor Olivier and Dafulaya, sorry, I wrote his surname wrongly, saying this morning we should move away from pure humanitarian assistance also when it comes to migrants. So my recommendation is basically that we should promote the social and social solidarity economy over the next few years, because globally there's a recognition that the social and solidarity economy, social challenges innovatively, that it can create jobs, bring dynamism and entrepreneurial flair to the social space, and shift economic values from profit seeking towards cooperation and mutual care. It's a very important field. We also have so many of our citizens from Africa working overseas in this field, and we could really, if we have finished our policy, also help to set some parameters and help them in their formalization, etc. It is also called the third sector economy, or the social or inclusive business, or social economy entrepreneurship. And the hallmark of it is to serve a specific social or environmental purpose that is mission driven, and that's where the social comes from. And then also to join forces to meet own needs and those of others. That's where the solidarity issue comes from. If young people could identify a need, and if they could have access to resources to help them fulfill economic activities to really satisfy that need, that is what we are thinking of. And of course, they are so innovative, and they can come up with new ways of taking care of others, new ways of also delivering services among all the 9 social policy pillars. And the strategy will also highlight how we can look into that. Also to say that, yeah, this social and solidarity economy is already very much operative and active. We know that in 2016, the UN Secretary General asked or established a task force to look into the social and solidarity economy, and that wonderful research has been done in this area. But in Africa, it is still quite, I would say, statistically and politically really invisible. We have some countries like South Africa and also Kenya and Tunisia, Morocco, Senegal that really have put their strategies through Parliament, and that really try to put in measures to support this economy. So my concluding is that idea is that maybe social protection should promote a hybrid of public-private enterprises to promote and augment social services, because we are also talking about social services here, and that the social and solidarity economy should become the fourth leg of the social protection cow, next to social insurance, social assistance, and social services. I think I will conclude by this, and I will be open for more questions afterwards. Thank you, Marius. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for this very welcome reflection on what is currently also happening and taking place at the Africa Union level. That's on top of what has happened over the number of years that are briefly mentioned. There is also, of course, other contexts that there wasn't time to cover now within the social protection domain at the AU and AUC level. For example, the work that the JLMP is doing, the Joint Labour Migration Program, operating under the auspices of the Africa Union Commission with the ILO, IM, and who else being partners. And there we have seen a number of developments as well. Very, very interesting. So I think the message we get from Johnny is that there are significant developments taking place at the Africa Union level, at a continental level. And those were not there, at least not before Dr. Johnny Strijdom had joined the AUC, to be a bit blunt about it. So I'm personally very much convinced that it is during the time of the senior position he held at the AUC before his retirement, and since then as well, that we have seen in the social space and the social protection space considerable, but I want to add again, or say again, considerable significant developments. It is then my pleasure to introduce to you our colleague from the World Food Programme, WFP, Ms. Sara McHattie. She is apparently not far from where we are now, but she's joined virtually, as you can see a picture. She has been working on humanitarian cash transfer programming and social transfers to crisis-affected populations for almost 20 years. Long history in this. She has developed policies for the EU, led innovations on cash programming for refugees and vulnerable populations in the humanitarian sector, and supported humanitarian safety nets throughout the Middle East. Currently, she's working with the UN World Food Programme, WFP, Regional Bureau for Southern Africa, leading a multidisciplinary team to roll out operational and strategic support on social protection, cash programming, school feeding, HIV, digital financial inclusion, South-South cooperation, and country capacity strengthening to 11 countries in the SADC region. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all have heard about the WFP. Those of us who work also in the practical sense of the word in the social protection space would know and would understand the absolutely critical role that this organization plays in the world, and in particular also in Africa. Many of us have witnessed this, and I wouldn't want to think where the continent would have been had it not been for the consistent, committed efforts and inputs of the WFP. It's therefore my pleasure to ask Ms. Sara McHattie to talk to us about the work of the WFP in relation to our topic for this panel, and how to go forward. Sara, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marius, and welcome and hello to my fellow panelists. I'm indeed honored to be sitting on this panel. So I wanted to speak quickly about what WFP is as an organization, and then I'll try and stay a little bit succinct because I think I would like to keep as much time as possible for discussion and to address the questions of the audience. But just to give a bit of background on WFP, WFP is the biggest humanitarian organization in the world. We have offices in over 85 countries. And this year alone, we've aimed to reach about 80 million people with humanitarian assistance. Our main contribution to the Sustainable Development Agenda is through SDG 2, which is the Zero Hunger Agenda, which means we work to end hunger, to improve nutrition, and to achieve food security for populations around the world. We have two missions, so one foot both in the Save Lives agenda, and many of you will be familiar with our humanitarian work where we provide food and cash transfers to people who are affected by crises, but also in the Change Lives agenda. And this is really our contribution to the development agenda around building household and community resilience, strengthening food systems, all the way from production of food to consumption of nutritious diets, because without a strong food system, we can't ensure food security, and also building government capacities. This latter point, I think, is the most relevant for the social protection agenda ahead of us now. So I'll speak a little bit about how WFP supports social protection, but I'd also take a little bit of a deep dive on what I think is a really important way forward towards social protection. So WFP supports social protection in two ways. One way is supporting governments to build solid and relevant programs and their capacities to be able to deliver on social protection. But also when a crisis happens and a country or a government cannot respond to it and there are people in need, WFP always stands by to provide complementary assistance. So for example, right now in Southern Africa, we have big programs in Southern Madagascar and in Southern Angola dealing with the acute food insecurity there. Every year we respond to cyclones and floods. In fact, that season is coming upon us now in the next few months. But we also have a response in something we call lean season assistance, which is the assistance that we provide to populations affected by food insecurity due to the cyclical agricultural season and to meet those gaps. So these initiatives are always done in coordination with government, but something that we also try to do more and more because we see it strengthening government systems as well, is to do it through government systems. And many of our COVID responses, in fact, were done through government systems. So we might use a government registry to identify and target vulnerable populations, but we'll also work with governments, for example, on public works to help with the community participation and the community identification of public works. But I think what I wanted to focus on now and to frame the work that we do and the support that we do for governments is this concept of social assistance. And addressing poverty is multifunctional, it's a multidimensional problem. There are many components to it. We have to tie lots of different pieces to it. But in one way, at the core of social assistance is if we give people money, then people will be less poor, people will have more money to buy food, they'll be less hungry, people will invest in livelihoods, people will invest in social capital, that means sending their children to school, people will be more resilient to shocks, more able to respond to shocks, and people will also demand more. And here I'm thinking of Professor Kalula's comments around social justice. If people have money, they can have the confidence to demand and they can have the confidence to spend where necessary. So I think that social assistance part is very important. And so in that sense, when we work with governments to strengthen and build their systems, what we're really trying to achieve and what we'd like to achieve in the next little while is scale. Because while WFP is a very big organization, in fact, this year we transferred, just in terms of cash, so I'm not talking about food aid here, but just in terms of cash in the Southern African region, $224 million to 3 million people in 9 different countries. And that's a very significant amount of money, but that is still less than South Africa spent on social protection in 2021 in their own country. And I think if we're going to see transformative change, if we're going to really have an impact on poverty, we have to build systems and we have to build capacities so that we can achieve scale at the country level, at the national level, so that all people are able to cover their basic needs and to cover their food security. And social transfers are certainly one of the core ways to get that done. But these programs also have to be accessible and predictable. One of the presentations said that we have to stop providing humanitarian assistance to migrants. And there's a lot of truth in that. Humanitarian programs are designed to last for 2 months or 3 months, maybe even 5 months. But I think that what's really key to break the cycle of poverty, because after every shock, households struggle to recover if they don't have assistance. To break that cycle of poverty, we have to make sure that all affected households are able to access predictable assistance that is sustained over the time that they need it. And then also we have to make sure that these government systems are sustainable. And this is, again, a key reason why we work with governments, because governments can offer legislation. They anchor programs in legislation, which means that they are bound by law to deliver. There's a policy framework to deliver, and people can access through those systems, and also strong institutions that are able to actually reach out to the most vulnerable in the most vulnerable populations in these nations. So I think, in terms of where we go from here, certainly as WFP, we are always ready to respond, and we stand ready to respond to humanitarian needs as they arise. But what I would really like to see in the future is leveraging our learning that came from the COVID response. We saw governments respond quickly, at scale, to the needs of their population. And I think that that's a really important sounding board and a launching board to be able to strengthen our programming, but also with that has brought renewed attention to social protection. So what are the key partnerships we can build around these social transfers and the social assistance to be able to build these programs to be at scale? And here I'm thinking of the institutions that have presented here during this conference, but also the international financial institutions that are starting to put more and more money behind social protection, development of social protection systems, and also making it more accessible to populations. Thank you very much. Over to you, Marius.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Just having the mic started yet. Again, thank you so much, Sarah, for this informative contribution to, in your view, and WFP's view, where we are and what needs to be further done, and also enlightening us about the work of the WFP itself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our fourth panelist had to leave us for a few moments because she has to take this PCR test to enable her to return to Zambia tomorrow. I think in order not to waste time, we will give her an opportunity to say a few words when she comes back. But let me for now already open the floor for some inputs, questions, remarks from your side to be addressed to the panel, or just contributing to this general theme. How do we take all of this forward? Floor is open here in Rosebank at the hotel, but also virtually. And I believe the virtual participants, Susan, I believe you are keeping track of their inputs. Anybody here in the, let's start here in this, our venue. Any comments, issues thus far to our three learned colleagues? You won't always have this opportunity to address questions and remarks to such an expertised and learned group of people. Colleagues, any inputs? Questions? Is there a question online? Is a hand online? Can we have the details, please? Somebody just tell us, read to us, please. Thank you so much.
No?
Right, so who's online, Susan?
Okay, so we have a question from Professor Ngay.
From whom?
Ngay.
Professor Ngay Kanyongolo from Malawi, yes?
Yes.
What is the question and address to whom?
She's raised her hand.
Sorry, Ngay, please go ahead and pose the question, please.
Thank you very much, Marius, and thank you all the presenters. Quite interesting presentations. I have a comment and question on Johan's presentation. He has talked of social and solidarity economy, SSE, quite an interesting concept, but I wondered how, or what rather, what is the normative content of this, what he called new fourth leg of social protection cow. I find it very interesting, but to me it sounded more or less the kind of discussion we've had on the financing of social security and the importance of making sure that we are putting money in the basket to fund some of the social services and social protection system. Understanding of this SSE. Thank you.
Thank you. Very important question. This new component, according to the AU, or AUC and social protection, sounds fascinating. We certainly would want to hear more about it. Any other hand for now, whether virtual or physical in the room here?
We have another question from Isaac Kabelenga.
Isaac Kalenga. Isaac from Zambia. Isaac, please, just we only see your forehead. Isaac, maybe you can just lower your screen that we can see more of you. And then you can pose a question or make your comment, please.
Thank you and good afternoon to all the presenters. You have made the wonderful presentations. I have 3 suggestions which I would like to bring to the attention of the SASPEN Secretariat on how best to go forward in trying to actualize what we have debated. The first suggestion which I have is, I do not know. I'm thinking that maybe if SASPEN doesn't have anyone to represent us at the African Union, that maybe we consider selecting maybe 1 or 2 people who can go and represent SASPEN at the African Union, where they should present all the issues that we have raised to the African Union. I'm thinking that that can help. Then the second proposal which I have is, because SASPEN, I think, is a recognized institution, I'm proposing that they consider organizing national workshops in all the countries which I think they are members of SASPEN, so that we have national engagement with the Republican presidents, the directors of social welfare and other social security institutions. I'm thinking that in that way we'll be able to deliver to them directly the message that we want, especially what we want to see in our countries. And then the third proposal that I have is that SASPEN should consider also supporting local institutions that are championing social protection issues. You know, these are institutions that are supposed to remind our governments, that are supposed to lobby, to advocate, and also to do research to help our governments understand the importance of social protection. So instead of just operating at higher levels, I'm of the view that we operate at all the levels, from micro level, meso level, and macro level. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac, for putting out all of these challenges. If all of this could materialize, this would be really wonderful. Let me do as follows. I want to say 1 or 2 things about what you have said, because I want to add to this as a question to Johnny as well. But then I'm going to ask the panelists just to keep the questions and the comments. Some were comments, some were questions, and I'm going then to ask Mutale first to make her presentation, because she's back with us now. And then we can proceed with our Q&A, because we are a bit running behind of time. If I understand Isaac's suggestions correctly, I think some of these are already being addressed, Isaac. Workshops are being held and organized, support workshops by SASPEN. Secondly, the local institutions supporting them at request. We have done so. We could do so as SASPEN. We would like to do more on that. We have done a lot of that also even in the far past. We have done that. On the issue of how SASPEN can bring to the attention of the AU, the AUC in particular, Johnny. Could you comment on that? Is of course an institutional structural answer to that, is a content answer to that, very important, but something that really works, not just a structure, please. And while we're on that question, let me add the following. Johnny, there is one serious issue which applies not just to the African Union, but certainly also to SADC as an organization and to the ILO as the global organization. In fact, I had a discussion yesterday with the Department of Social Development here on this issue. In some of our African countries, South Africa being one, the social protection function resorts primarily, not within the Ministry of Labor, but primarily within another ministry, in this case, social development. Here, the tripartite structure of the institutions I mentioned, ILO, AUC, and African Union, and SADC, as far as the government partner is concerned, it's the Ministry of Labor that is being invited. So in the cases where there are separate ministries of, concerned with social protection, it is a problem. They are not there. I mean, what in the kind of the informal discussion I had with the Department of Social Development yesterday, they were plainly not aware of any of the social protection developments having taken place at a SADC and the African Union level. And I know, of course, I leave it to you, John, to answer that. But first, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you our fourth panelist, Ms. Mutale Wakunuma. She is also a member of the Board of Directors of SASPEN. She's currently the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Institute for Social Policy in Africa, with representation in 4 African countries. She's a seasoned social protection expert, and you heard her speak actually as well, and chair actually in this conference, with over 10 years of experience in the field. She has played a central role in major courses in the field of social protection, ranging from drafting social protection policies, influencing the position of social protection across the continent, leading civil society engagement in social protection, supporting capacity development needs to enhance implementation of social protection, and providing consulting support to social policy on the continent. A practitioner par excellence, but researcher as well. Mutale, a few minutes to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I had to go and have my nose pricked and poked and made uncomfortable, so apologies for that. I'll make my intervention very quick because I'm speaking after very distinguished individuals, so there's not too much to add to what they've already said. As a starting point, I think all of us are clear about the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063 and where they situate themselves within the development framework globally and on the continent. The Sustainable Development Goals, we know, try to address some of the greatest challenges facing humanity today. The focus is really on ensuring not just that the needs of current generations are met, but of future generations as well. The focus is really on reducing poverty, eliminating poverty as a matter of fact, reducing hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, and also reducing inequality. These I'm pointing out because they relate very closely to social protection ambitions. All right. And then in terms of Agenda 2063, we all know that it's basically a very strategic framework for socioeconomic transformation of the continent. The priorities that relate to the Sustainable Development Goal on that relates to social protection is a high standard of living, quality of life, and well-being for all citizens of the continent. And the focus within this is around incomes, jobs and decent work, poverty, inequality and hunger, social security and social protection, including persons with disabilities. And then also around modern affordable habitats and quality basic services. And this also comes full circle to our discussion today around social protection and social services. So this links to SDGs 1, 2, 8, and 11. as we have heard, so focusing on poverty, on hunger, on inequality and decent work. I'll skip the other things that I wanted to mention and go straight to where I think we should be focusing going forward. So to start with, the Agenda 2063 focuses on making Africa a bit more competitive and bringing the economy to a level where it's at par with the other regions. Unfortunately, we haven't performed very well on some of the key metrics, particularly if you think about the situation of poverty on the continent. The Agenda 2063 was adopted in 2015. Efforts towards its adoption began in 2013. So we had 50 years in which to deliver Agenda 2063. We're 10 years into that period. I think Johan mentioned the second decade starts in 2023. At the current rate, between 2015 and now, we've only managed to reduce poverty by 1.6 percentage points, a very miserable rate, if you ask me. And so currently poverty stands at 40% on average in sub-Saharan Africa, meaning that Africa contributes 2/3 of the poor population to the world. Again, another embarrassing statistic there. So basically, inequality is also well and thriving in Africa. The poverty reduction that has happened, the little poverty reduction that has happened, has not translated into per capita improvements in income and consumption. So we still have a long way to go. Now we're talking about Agenda 2063 and not even Agenda 2030. And Agenda 2030 is very ambitious in terms of eliminating poverty, because for Agenda 2030 was not supposed to leave anybody behind. And there's supposed to be no trace of poverty in the world. So we're still doing quite miserably. But then, even without all this, we have to consider the fact that the world was faced with addressing COVID, a pandemic that we didn't anticipate. In some countries, like for instance in Zambia, it's actually projected that poverty has actually increased between 2019 and 2020 after the pandemic hit. And this is very likely in many other countries, in many other African countries. This has been found, for instance, in Mauritius as well. So as it is, we're looking at the possibility of poverty actually increasing in the region, which leaves us at a worse of place than we were even in 2018. What does that mean then? What do we need to do? I think some of the gaps in terms of getting us to where we need to be in terms of providing social protection is we're still not providing, on the continent, we still have quite a patchwork of social protection programs. These are not supported by data systems, by comprehensive data systems. We don't have, even for Agenda 2063, other than the AUC social policy, a rigorous monitoring and evaluation framework for social protection. We need to be very consistent about what the targets are and how we get there on a step-by-step basis. And we need to, within this, place ourselves very strategically as non-state actors and how we influence the ambitions to achieve 2063 agenda. Another gap, another place we need to be focusing is around financing. I can't stress this enough. This is one of the things actually that the Agenda 2063 focuses on in terms of providing Africa mobilized resources. And we need to get to that point. And then also we need to a greater commitment, political and social commitment, to extending coverage. As it is, Africa still has the highest, the lowest rate of coverage of social protection. For formal social protection, social security, we're still at less than 15% as a region, sub-Saharan Africa. And therefore we need to commit to increasing coverage, especially because we have a huge informal economy on the continent. Another thing that I'd like to borrow the Dr. Zulu's terminology yesterday to criminalize poverty, we need to define what are unacceptable minimums for ourselves as a continent. There are just certain things that we should not continue to see on the continent. Some of the minimums that have been defined in frameworks such as the ILO recommendation 202 have given us a basis to start from, but we need to up our own measure as Africa and say that we cannot accept certain levels of poverty and criminalize it. Another thing that we need to go towards is inclusive programming. We've heard a number of presentations looking at the situation of women on the continent, the situation of children, the situation of persons with disabilities, and all that. We need to start to be a bit more proactive in programming inclusively and ensuring that we're looking at the needs of the more vulnerable and those that are furthest behind in order to bring them to the fore towards Agenda 2030. And then also we need to get to a point of universally provided benefits, whether we do this progressively, but to get some commitment already to start heading in that direction and providing universal benefits. Some of the issues that we still deal with, even when we provide social protection, is around adequacy. We are providing benefits, but these are not adequate to impact poverty or dent poverty the way that it should. And so we see the impacts are very minimal resulting from that. So we need to invest a bit more in ensuring that we're protecting the benefits from inflation. Yeah, and then we also, I think it would be good to understand and to start to paint a picture to our governments about what the cost of inaction for social protection are. What is it costing the continent? What are we losing in value? What are the opportunity costs of us not providing social protection to our people? And we need to move to a whole of government approach and ensure greater integration, efficiency, and comprehensiveness. Thank you very much.
Quite a mouthful, ladies and gentlemen. If we have all of these ideas of our 4 panelists, I think we have a much different world in social protection in the next few years. Any other questions from the floor? Let's start with the floor first, in addition to what we already have on the previous round. Are there any online questions, Susan? Any further online questions or remarks? Nothing? Okay, since we are running out of time, I'm going to ask the panelists to address what we have heard in terms of the questions. I'm not going to repeat them. There were 1 or 2 remarks as well. So let's use the same order that we had our panelists when they spoke. So Evance, over to you, please. Just keep it short, please.
Thank you very much, Marius. I can't recall any question directly addressed to me, except for me to add that in terms of going forward, at least in the world of work sector, through their initiatives that are now underway as part of the ILO mandate is renewal. And if you look at the centenary declaration, if you also take into account the important critical new convention on harassment at work, and above all, the essence of dealing the critical issue of dealing with the gender mainstreaming, because we tend to forget that the people who bear the brunt of this, as always, are women, in terms of lack of facilities, social protection, basic needs. So the women, particularly in Africa, tend to be disadvantaged in so many ways, and we need to, in whatever kind of strategies we design for the both agendas, we need to take this into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Evans. Johnny, I think there were quite a few of the matters addressed to you directly or indirectly. Could you please comment? Thank you. Sorry, Johnny can, sorry, I think he is unmuted. Sorry, we can't hear you, Johnny, just a moment.
Okay, now,
Okay,
thank
please
you.
continue, Johnny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you very much, Professor Ngay, for your question or your remark. Look, I didn't try to create a confusion here. Also, it was just a suggestion and a joke of becoming the fourth leg of the cow. I think this really merits a whole special conference of SASPEN, especially when this instrument has been developed, properly validated, etc., that we take it up and look at it. It's about financing or provision of services, and if we look at what the social economy really is about, it's about cooperatives, mutual societies, associations, and foundations. That's where the private sector also comes in, and some other social enterprises, and to utilize our young people to get themselves organized, but they need support. If they need to visit old people and see that they are fine, they need transport for that, etc. This is just a small example, but there are many, many, many others when it comes to the environment, and our young people pick up these issues. They want to respond to it in solidarity, but they don't always have the opportunity. And it, at the end of the day, really merits what Professor Kalula said. A multifaceted new political commitment is needed in our times. And I think this whole new concept of the social and solidarity economy in Africa should be fully utilized in terms of delivering services to our people. Then just because, as we said, it's already happening. These type of services are already being done and rolled out also during COVID. And in the aftermath of COVID, we will need this type of solidarity economy and the entrepreneurship that can be incubated in many areas in that. But there hasn't been enough training. There hasn't been enough awareness raising of the concept. And of course, it was not legally secured. Only in a few countries, as I mentioned, and in the case of South Africa, the Department of Economic Affairs is running it. So immediately we should break down the silos there and speak to them. Coming back to what Marius said, Professor Olivier said about the issue of social partners. It is sad that they don't feel that much involved, but I can ensure, really ensure you that that when it comes to this social and economy, social and solidarity economy, really it is run from the division, labor, migration, and employment, labor, and migration. So definitely the social partners will be involved, and right from at the upcoming STC, it will definitely be, they will be involved all the way, also when we have our validation exercise, etc. And there are so many links also to the informal economy, as you can imagine. If we could formalize some of this, that we, if we could formalize some of these activities into the formal economy, I think there's a vast array of options available. Okay, I'll stop there, but as I said, maybe we can spend the next session, the whole conference, on this new economy. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Sarah, just briefly, please.
Yeah, thank you. There weren't any questions directly addressed to me, but I just wanted to echo some of what some of the other panelists said, but also to particularly on the fragmentation. If we want social protection systems to be accessible and to be at scale, they have to be simple as well. So we have to find a way to support the development of programs that are simple and accessible whilst also addressing all of these multiple needs. And it is a big challenge, and I think we're all up to it to achieve our targets. But definitely also something actually that came up a little bit, but it's also the importance of systems and digitalization as well. This is a big advantage and an opportunity because this can simplify the way that we deliver assistance and provide access to people. But I think that that also is an important item that would warrant a conference all by itself. Thank you very much. Over.
Thanks, Sara. Mutale, anything you would like to add? And finally?
No, I think since I missed the question and answers, I'll pass. But if there's anything we can go away with is to start thinking about a Marshall Plan against poverty.
Good, Marshall Plan against poverty. I hope and I believe that some of our people here, Secretariat have taken note of some of the good suggestions made by our panelists and by those who posed questions and made comment. Ladies and gentlemen, it brings us to the end of the panel session. So let us give a warm round of applause again for our 4 panelists for their inputs, for trying to tie all of this together for us. So let's do so, please. And then in the final instance, we are now really at the stage of what we call the concluding session. After 2 very intensive days of workshopping, conferencing rather. And before I say more about word of thanks and very, very brief summary of where we are and where we are going, our first round of thanks, so to say, should of course go to the Friedrich Ebert Foundation for, again, its very extensive inputs, not just financially, but also financially, to make this a reality, what we have been experiencing the last 2 days. We are and remain thankful for all the support over the years. In fact, I am going to ask Gilbert to come up and say a few words. Thanks, Gilbert.
So, thank you, Marius. And I also want to thank all our participants here. I want to say a big thank you to SASPEN, to the resource persons, to the participants who are so interested and working hard for the improvement of social protection, not only in the region. In the last 2 days, it has been just a pleasure to meet you all. There were some very nice acquaintances, some very nice networking, and I also want to say thank you for organizing that. I just appreciate that a lot. It was just a pleasure with everybody of you. I also want to say thanks to the many helping hands, to the hotel, to the technical team who did, I think, an excellent job. I personally learned so much. I fear I don't have the time to share everything of it. I tried to give you a short insight. I think, or the FES thinks, that social protection is still the most promising path to address the manifold issues of inequality, poverty, and disadvantage in our societies. And as Mutale just said, there is still a long way to go. We have to keep in mind that this design of social protection has to look at many, many factors, including accessibility, taking into account the existing culturally rooted social protection mechanisms that are already there. We have to connect to them. And we also have to closely look at the groups we're targeting, like you said this morning, especially refugees. We should look at the bigger picture there, not only are they refugees, let's do something for them in the short term, but thinking about what is happening in the bigger picture here. These are human beings, they were having lives, and these are global phenomena which take place every day in the world, and we have to find solutions to these things. It's also very important, what I've learned in these 2 days, to look at what ambitions are we following when we design social protection schemes. For example, is it a pro-poor approach? Is it one that wants to enable more agricultural activity? Is it one that wants to stimulate economic activities? This is also always to have to be taken into account in order to design them properly and make them more effective. The resource persons, you have been providing a lot of information in the last 2 days, which is extremely important. Now we have to work to integrate all these learnings and influence policies and discourses. We have to raise more political commitment. There is still, and I guess a lot because people don't know about all the details, still a lot of stigma on social protection. It's not effective, it's expensive whatsoever. But only by designing them properly, we can avoid the mistakes and making them more effective in the future. We have to understand, and we have to help everybody to understand the needs and the possibilities and also the benefits of social protection. And then we will see improvements. Social protection should not be a question of privilege, but an issue that is in all of our interests. And also that should be natural, a right to those who need it. Again, let me say thank you for the last 2 days. It's been amazing. The FES will absolutely remain committed to the issue of social protection. We're very confident that SASPEN will take the next steps to become and to stay an independent expert network with such engaged structures and secretariat. I have no doubt about that. Thank you again, especially to our partner SASPEN. Now, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay active. Thank you.
Tu parles de quoi d'abord? Le toi tu comptes tout le rapport. Voilà.
Ladies and gentlemen, I really don't know what else I have to say. I think he has already said everything that needs to be said at the end. Nevertheless, let me just do a few things. There's no time to even take you through a proper summary of our program, but I'll mention a few highlights and then try to bring all of this together. And then finally, a few words of thanks. I think we had really, as was the case with our previous conferences too, intense engagement. The level of the presentations that I heard and what I read, some of them even before the time, was more than just instructive. There's an urgency that I heard, given also the impact of the pandemic on social protection and the need for further restructuring and reform in the subcontinent. We were fortunate yesterday to listen to Ms. Renata Nawagama of the UNDP addressing us on matters concerning towards a more holistic social protection model in sub-Saharan Africa, the need for a comprehensive social protection framework, amongst others, was discussed by her. Very important to lay the basis for our further discussions yesterday. Then we had a number of very, very informative perspectives on analysis of what countries in SADC and even beyond SADC have been doing in this COVID-19 time to address social protection needs, deficiencies, and also groups that may previously not have been covered. We listened to people like Mr. David Kanjele, Zachary Schlange, Mr. Isaac Kabelenga, Dr. John Mushomi, Anne Wokenhauer, Professor Roderick Mpitsisa. Countries on whose systems there was a reflection include Namibia, Uganda, Zambia, Botswana. In between, of course, we also heard about, of course, South Africa in between. Poster presentations, a number of colleagues, Ms. Violet Molal and her team, Mr. Festo Zingombe as well. And then the final session yesterday, also very interesting, an important one on youth and employment services, Dr. Hannah Dawson, and also Mr. Isaac Kabelenga again. A lot of food for thought. Today we kicked off with the second keynote presentation early this morning, which involved Dr. Dafalea and myself, looking at social protection and operational tool for the humanitarian development and peace nexus, trying to unearth some, in our view, areas that are currently deficient, not being appropriately addressed. First, from a principal perspective, the need for transition or linkages between cash-based interventions and social protection, the need for an underpinning developmental approach, which seems to be taking place, and here this has to translate in social protection terms. So we reflected on some of the normative, conceptual and operational deficiencies and made some suggestions in that regard. Then we had a session on inclusion and access to social services by women and other marginalized groups. Presenters included Mr. Jonathan Tumwebaze, as well as Snokwanda Preti Nkade, if I pronounce this correctly. Very interesting session, important recommendations made by our colleagues. The next session today concerned inclusion and access to social services by women and other marginalized groups. Presenters included Ms. Grace Makwaya, Ms. Danita Hingston, and also Ms. Kalatina Tina Nasar Sira. I hope I pronounce this correctly. I'm not going to repeat what we heard. Actually, today it's hopefully still fresh in the mind. And of course, then we had our final session just before this one with our four esteemed panelists, Professor Evance Kalula, bringing out or emphasizing the social justice connection, the application in the field of work, the need to regroup, refocus, reconceptualize, if you like. Also, and perhaps in particular in the ILO context, the informal economy relevance issue of that, the need for further skills development, and the setting up and capacitating of institutions to make real what needs to happen. Dr. Johnny Strijdom, currently back with the Africa Union Commission, enlightened us about important recent developments, including the second implementation plan of Agenda 2063 and its relation to social protection. Social Agenda 2063 adopted earlier this year in the new protocol, the rights of citizens to social protection, social security, recently finalized and subject to final approval by the Africa Union structures, the COVID-19 response framework of the continent, the workshops that they have and are embarking on. Importantly, is discussion on the 10-year social and solidarity strategy as a key policy framework, certainly something we need to engage more. Then our colleague from the WFP, Ms. Sara McHattie, indicating to us the crux of the work done by the WFP, highlighting, for example, the helping countries with developing a solid and a relevant programmatic framework in social protection, but also to provide complementary assistance where needed, both in areas of food, but also cash interventions, strengthening governance systems, an important focus. She highlighted the importance of social assistance, the building of social capital in this regard, building of resilience, and also, of course, institutions building. Ms. Mutale Wakunuma highlighted quite a number of issues, indicating to us the high standards set by both Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030, and viewing against that or mirroring against that where we stand and what needs to be done in the continent and in the subcontinent, bearing in mind the poverty rates affected in particular by COVID-19, the need for economic development, and highlighting then a number of very important steps that need to be taken. a comprehensive data system, for example, an MAE framework, specific targets to be set and to be met, non-state actors' involvement, coverage extension, what is really acceptable and what is not acceptable for us to define that, inclusive programming, the important issue of universally provided benefits, but also the adequacy of benefits. These were some of the issues highlighting by her, ending actually with the question, what are the costs of inaction? And may it never be said of us, at least not us as SASPEN, all of us involved, that we have not acted where we could have and should have acted, given all the expertise within this network. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can not summarize, but suggest that I think there are a few key dimensions, takeaways, if we like. And I'm not talking about the contents of the discussion, I'm talking about what is it that I sense that we have achieved, if I could use that word, over the 2 days that has passed. I think we got a very good sense also through the reflection on the OSISA study, the panel led by Dr. Gifta Filaya, of the COVID-19 impact in the region and on social protection, but bearing in mind the broader economic and other environment. So critical, so crucial, because we are still in the midst of the pandemic. But I think what we have learned also through the pandemic is the importance of sustainability of social protection systems, what countries have done to reach out beyond where they ever were, also even in social assistance. And then the question, building on what the experiences have been in COVID-19 in relation to social protection in the subcontinent, what do we learn from that in terms of developing more sustainable social protection system? Linked to that, the need for change and reform to make social protection in our part of the world more responsive to the context, not just to the pandemic context, but to the context of our countries, of our people, of the needs that we have here. I think the other important takeaway that we have is the lead taken by, in particular, other institutions. If we talk about our own African institutions, I think most impressive is the lead taken by the Africa Union at a continental level. There's also, of course, some progress made in terms of the lead taken by SADC as an organization. But I think it's in particular the level of the AU that we have seen remarkable developments and guiding frameworks and implementing frameworks that have been developed and that are in place. Our takeaway is that not just that there are interesting topics for further conferencing. This is never the first objective or even a primary objective of why we are conferencing, but really what contribution can we make in a region to bring about better social protection for our people? This, in effect, is always what we should aim at. Well informed, of course, and that, I think, is the value of this conference, that the amount and the high level of information that we have received also from our researchers from all over the region, the researchers including not just academic, but so many of our practitioners who are involved in the analysis of what is going on in the region and that needs to be done. This is really development witness increasingly so in our region. Of course, we had very deep level discussions. I marveled at the fact that even last night at the informal dinner, and perhaps you could call it an informal networking dinner, that the variety that we had there, I think the table where I was sitting, we had some very, very deep level discussions on the one hand on the gender dimensions of social protection, amongst others, also the shifting in cultural and moral values and norms that affect society, and of course eventually social protection as well. But then also a more light-hearted engagement. I heard astonishing about an advocacy activist rather in our midst, who first wanted to be a nun, but ended up now here at the conference of SASPEN. I heard about an academic who once was a stateless person and now is a leading young scholar, not just in SADC, but literally in the whole of Africa. But then I also heard that he could easily transform himself in a karaoke presenter. So we had amazing experiences. I mean, I met at this conference an aspiring FAS director who seems to be an expert when it comes to taking photographs. And I hope we will all have the benefit of the wonderful photographs that he has taken. But I'm actually serious. You saw him taking very strategic photographs throughout the session of presenters, but also the informal setting. And to me personally, it was heartening also to see how well he just gelled with all of us. This was a very special experience. It remains for me to thank, except for the FAS, also our UN organizations that who participated and provide so much depth to what we have been hearing and discussing, to the WFP, Sarah, to the UNDP, Renata, to mention the two in particular. Thank you so much for your very, very valuable contributions. To the DSD, the Acting Director General, who came literally with, I believe, with 3 or 4 of his chief directors. Quite a sign, I think, with the fact that I think, or of the fact that, and I think it's beyond curiosity because at least one of them was here the last 2 years as well, to see what are we really doing and perhaps, you know, what contribution we can make, you know, in that regard also for the region. We had colleagues from all over the region, and many of you are sitting here or listening or participating now virtually. I think I said at the beginning, if I didn't, then let me say it now. It's you made the conference. You are the people who came and present, asked the questions, the critical questions too, reflected on where we go, what need to be done, and the changes that are required. To the SASPEN governing structures, the Board of Directors, the Board of Trustees, and the Advisory Panel, thank you so much for your dedication and what you have been achieving over the years, overseeing the work of this institution through all the changes, reforms, the developments that have been and are taking place. We heard about the strategic plan having now been officially launched, for example, and there are quite a number of other initiatives and interventions also on the way. Our thanks also goes to the SADC SASPEN Secretariat, who diligently kept everything together for us, make sure, like clockwork, it went well, not just with the conference, but helping to make all of the arrangements together with the conference organizing committee. And I mentioned them yesterday already again, or actually the AP meeting I mentioned this. So let me say here in this meeting as well that the conference organizing committee, I don't want to exclude anybody, but I know Sergio Falanga is here, Gifta Falaya is here, of course, Susan and Naka from the Secretariat, also Professor Ngai Kanyogolo, and I'm not sure whether I forgot anybody, Susan, but the conference organizing committee had really been working very, very hard over many months to make this happen together with the SASPEN Secretariat and of course the FAS support, even beyond financial support. We also want to thank all the assistants who have been helping. Some of them are still here. And on a personal note, it was actually, and I say this now since our one colleague isn't here, but not since, but I realize he's not here, but I've noticed one of the assistants who time and again, when one of our dear participants who has a disability, the support given by that particular assistant to take him by the hand, make sure that he receives that he gets his food, his refreshments. We really looked after him. You cannot but notice this, and it is as part of a successful conference than anything else. Because if we have lost that human touch, then we have lost even the basis of social protection, I would think. The support given by the hotel, our logistical people here in the room, There are 3 of them at least, and then the many outside who made sure that we are kept safe, sound, well fed, and COVID safe as well. Taking our temperature every morning and making sure that there has been at least no incident until now. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a sheer privilege to have a conference with you over the last 2 days. I thank you deeply and sincerely for your commitment, as I said last night at the dinner, your commitment to the cause of social protection and the people of our region, not just SADC, but certainly Africa. It is not in vain. Keep on doing the good work you're doing. Press on. Never get tired or disillusioned or distressed or disheartened. The task is huge. There are many, many helping hands around you. Stay connected. This is what this network is for. Support each other. Support the network as such, not for purpose of building the network primarily, but that through the network we can deliver and expand and enhance social protection for the countries, the governments, the partners of our part of the world. I thank you and I wish you a safe journey. May God protect you. And for the AP and the 2 governing bodies, if we could reconvene in about 2 or 3 minutes, please, just for a short extended advisory panel meeting. I thank you and I greet you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marius, for those closing remarks. We will be going into an AP meeting, so the conference delegates will be free to go to your rooms and rest and just catch up on what you need to get done before you prepare for your departure. I'd just like to mention there are some delegates who will be traveling tomorrow, and I just want to give you your time slots for this. This information will also be at the front desk at the hotel if you just want to clarify, but we will give them this information later this evening. You could check by 8 p.m. So we have three pickup times. We have, so I'll just mention the pickup times and the names. If you want to clarify anything or change anything, kindly let me know so I can update the information. So we have 6:30, where we have Taku, Nokwanda, Danita, Edmos, Chileshe, Anna, and Kanande. 6:30. And then we have 9:30, Zake, Tina, and Jonathan. Then the last slot is at 12:30, Sergio, Nicola, and Chanda. Thank you. So if you have any changes to make or anything you'd like to let me know, you could see me after the AP meeting. Thank you.